Welcome everybody into another edition of Warm Weather Fans, the Sun Belt podcast. My name is Brian Stone. We've got the full crew on hand today. We've got Zeke Palermo, Matt Miguez. We're here to talk about all sorts of Sun Belt action from this past weekend and look ahead to the Saturday or Friday after Thanksgiving, Black Friday. We have one of those games. But before we get started, how are you guys doing? What's up? Zeke, I'll throw it to you first, and then we'll get over to Matt.
Yeah, I'm doing well. It feels good to all be back here. I joined the call last, and having us everyone here is a different energy. I'm really excited for it. I had a pretty good weekend. I got to watch some Division III playoff football, which was really enjoyable. I was out there at Berry College, and they were playing Maryville. Berry kind of sold. And that was disappointing because they're the team I'm there to cover.
Right.
But yeah, it was a good time. I enjoy. We're here talking about the Sun Belt. Of course, I enjoy watching non-SEC games. So it was a good time.
Matt,
living the dream. I got to attend a Louisiana Raging Cajuns football game as a fan yesterday.
Hey,
for the first time in like 3 years. Not even gonna lie to y'all, it felt wrong. sitting in the bleachers, going to the concession stand, like it felt wrong. But it was a good time. My wife and I enjoyed it, and today I didn't have the Saints to break my heart, so that's always a plus. And so now we're here to talk about what's going to be a wild final week in the Sun Belt.
Matt, that's a really where'd you get that shirt? That's really sick.
So this shirt, I actually bought it from the University bookstore. They came out at the beginning of this season with a vintage Louisiana collection.
Mm-hmm.
In the 90s, UL had a helmet that it was very similarly designed to the ones they wear now. Red, white stripe in the middle, and then it had this Cajun script on the side. If you actually go look on their Twitter, the Cajuns wore it last night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a really sick design. And it's probably the most comfortable shirt I own.
I remember last year there was a guy on Twitter, and I don't know how big this ever got, but he had redesigned like a mascot and branding for the Cajun. Albino. Did that ever catch any traction?
Oh, it's a huge grassroots thing here in Lafayette. The fan base is pushing really hard for that to be like the official mascot.
Because I thought that was sick. I will say I thought some of the like images or the graphics looked AI, and that turned me off a little bit. But I remember when that coming out last year, and it just kind of disappeared.
The guy that made it's actually a really cool dude. He graduated from UL and then went and do his master's at Columbia up in New York.
Yeah.
And so now he works in like graphic design up in New York. Dude's phenomenal.
That's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm interested to see what you guys kind of take away from this week's games. We had a lot of weird kind of results that we can definitely dive more into. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first, I'm just taking these games in the order they present themselves on ESPN.com. Again, they're not the order that necessarily they kicked off in, but we'll make do. The first game here, App State. I tweeted this the other day, sits up like the Undertaker. We thought they were dead. We thought their season was donezo. They only are going to play 11 games this year. And I said this to Zeke, and, people know this, but they had to win out against JMU and Georgia Southern in order to qualify for a bowl game because the Liberty game was canceled, obviously. They come out, they put up a 24-point second quarter and defeat JMU. And this game meant something to JMU too. Like, this wasn't a total nothing game. JMU, if they had won this game and beat Marshall in the season finale, they would be in the Sun Belt Championship. So it wasn't like JMU came out flat because they had nothing to play for. It seemed like, and extracurricular stuff aside, we can talk about that. It seemed like JMU had a lot to play for, and it ultimately didn't matter. Like, App kind of handed them their own backside, especially, like I said, with the 24-point second quarter. It was the two turnovers, I think, that really made the difference for both teams, App eventually running away with it. But this is kind of like two ships passing in the night, right? Like, this is App, who we basically considered dead, which I feel like was not like unfair to consider. They had turned in some real stinkers like in the past couple weeks, and I mean, frankly, throughout the entire season. And again, JMU had everything to play for, but JMU is just James Madison's just so inconsistent that there's really no way around it. It's like one week you're like, oh man, this team they could go win the Sun Belt. The next week it's like, they lost to a team that the fan base wants the head coach out immediately, and they're fighting for like a bowl slot. So you really just don't even really know what to expect out of either of these teams on a given week. So kind of give me you guys' takes, and then I'll jump in the rest of the way.
Well, this is the App State experience, is it not?
Yeah.
Even internally in the game, they went down 14-3 to start the game, and just kind of walked James Madison the rest of the way. Scored 20-6 through the back half of the second, and then the rest of the second half. I think for App fans, this might be the worst case scenario. And because Sean Clark still has a job, a win against Georgia Southern would put App State in a bowl game. They're not going to fire Sean Clark after a bowl game. I think this might have been the worst case scenario for App State. James Madison, as they looked a lot like they did when they played Southern, in that they were just flat. Offensively, not working well on third downs. I thought they were very poor. Although I felt like a lot of times watching this game that they were caught in third and longs, third and mediums, third and longs. It wasn't like they were not converting on certain third and short. They just weren't converting third and sevens.
Right.
But then contrast that with the actual yardage numbers, and JMU out-yarded App State. And I have long subscribed to that being a coaching issue. Not being able to turn yardage into points is a coaching issue. I thought that this was a very surprising result, as a lot of them were this week. And I think we need to start reflecting on like these games where James Madison does look flat and consider why that might be.
Do we think it's like a coaching issue, or?
I think that's the only thing you can point to right now, because like Alonzo Barnett in a game where they scored 20 points was good. Ymir Knight in a game where they only scored 20 points was very efficient. Like this team was, they forced, for much of the first half, they held App to very meager production. So I think that's the only thing you can look to right now.
Mm-hmm.
Look, my takeaways from this are, you outgained App 400 to 365. You had 5 more first downs than they did. I think the key statistic in this game was the fact that you turned the ball over twice if you're James Madison. You gave App State bonus opportunities to capitalize, and they did. And also, you got to look at the what is on the box score as a 9-yard punt return for a touchdown. I'm not sure if that's accurate.
That was a block. That was a blocked punt.
Okay, because I didn't watch this game to be quite frank.
Yeah.
But look, here's the thing, right? We're talking about the inconsistencies of James Madison, and I don't necessarily disagree with that take. But how wild is it that we have this tone that James Madison is not a good football team, and they're 8-3?
Yeah,
I don't have that tone. They're the most inconsistent. Like they have the highest highs and the lowest lows.
For sure,
like, you just have no idea what you're getting.
But typically, when you have that point about a team, it's very negative, right? Like they're an inconsistent team because they're 500. They're an inconsistent team because they're below 500 and losing a lot of close games. James Madison is still 8-3 with a first-year head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So like that's the thing that people have to, because I've seen some fans, kind of flying off the handle a little bit with James Madison, and it's like, dude, y'all are 8-3. Like, let's calm down. Kurt Signetti's not your coach anymore.
Right.
You brought a dude up from D2, and he's continuing to have success. And look, a good win from App, considering. I agree with Zeke's point. If you want Sean Clark to be fired, this is not the result that you were looking for,
Right.
because this doesn't help that case. But look, I think that this was a prototypical Sunbelt game where even your 500 teams like App State can find a way to have success, especially at home, and beat a team that on paper in James Madison. I mean, I had James Madison winning this game by 2 scores.
Mm-hmm. I want your guys' perspective on this, because when I first joined the pod 2 years ago with Brian, and then last year when we started this pod, both of you guys talked about, within the context of App State, about how Sean Clark was always had been feasting on previous success, the infrastructure and the recruits and the player, the staff that had been left over from previous successes. I, as someone newer to this conference, am I wrong to draw the similar comparisons to what Bob Chesney is doing? Because in these low games, you called them the lowest of lows, Brian, I feel incredibly underwhelmed by what Bob Chesney is doing. And it leaves me with a taste in my mouth of, are you really this good, or are we just, suffering from previous success? Are we benefiting from Alonzo Barnett, a guy who was already on the roster last season and was supposed to start for the James Madison team last year? Are we benefiting from, albeit without its highest production guys, one of the best defenses in the conference last season? I'm feeling that fatigue with Bob Chesney right now.
So I'm gonna go first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I will say that for me personally, I think it's too early.
Sure.
To have that conversation, because he's only coached 11 games at James Madison, right?
Right.
If you're sitting here, deep into year 2, maybe even early to year 3, and they look the same as they do right now, okay, then that conversation is way more, substantial, right?
Sure.
But for me, I like to give coaches a year, if not 2, to kind of get their feet under them, with a new program, a new roster, a new recruiting area, things like that. But I do see where you're coming from.
Sure.
Even though they're sitting at 8-3, you're kind of like, how is this team 8-3?
Because this loss was not good. The loss to Georgia Southern, they did not look good. The loss to ULM, I frankly don't remember. That was back in October.
And some of their wins haven't been
good.
Pretty.
But even not, I guess it would be 2 weeks ago now. I remember even in the win against Old Dominion, Brian, you and I talked about last week. I was very unimpressed by them there.
Yeah, some of their wins haven't been pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to take what I've seen from James Madison fans and kind of what they've said online about this team.
Sure.
I think a lot of the vitriol that I have seen it's toward Chesney, but it's because they named Dean, I can't think of his last name, whoever the offensive coordinator. Apparently he's only had 1 season of full-time offensive coordinator experience before this, where he was the OC at Holy Cross, which was where Chesney came from. And
Dean
Kennedy. And frankly, to a lot of people, from what I've seen, people have just said, this isn't really acceptable to bring a guy up and him have essentially 1 year of offensive coordinator experience at a Holy Cross is FCS, right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, they are. They're FCS.
Okay.
Yep.
So people have kind of been railing on Chesney, but not because of him, but because of his coaching choices for his coordinators, and on the offensive side of the ball specifically. So that's one thing that I have seen is people say, you gave this guy that basically had no track record, like full control of the offense. And, like we said, Barnett didn't play last year. Like that was the McLeod show. And the other thing too, Zeke, I kind of disagree about coasting off of, they had so many guys transfer out after last year. Like this is
right.
Are you familiar with like Theseus's ship, where it's like,
yeah,
if
just
you
rebuilding
replace
it.
all the part, yeah. So like that's basically the way I feel about the James Madison team. Like this is not a 1-to-1 with those app teams where it was like the only thing that the app teams really did was every couple years they had to replace a quarterback, but like the receivers were the same, the running backs were the same. I mean, heck, like I know he just transferred out, but like Nate Noel, who's now at Missouri, like that was a Satterfield guy, I believe. So like that goes back multiple head coaches. So that was always my issue, was like Satterfield didn't have like the mass exodus that Signetti did when he left, where like a ton of players didn't follow him to Louisville when he dipped and went up here where I live now. Frankly, he had more players, it felt like, in the Sun Belt that played for other teams followed him up there. Like Georgia Southern had two players from like their 2020 season, which was fairly successful, go up to Louisville and follow Satterfield. Whereas this was more like everybody just kind of went separate directions. Like McLeod's at Texas State, Surratt and Tyson Lawton and all those guys that followed Chesney, or not Chesney, Signetti. Sorry, I'm getting my coaches mixed up. Signetti up to Indiana. They're there. A lot of these guys that are producing, whether good or bad or whatever, for JMU, like they're being coached kind of for the first time by Chesney. Like they didn't really have they didn't play like meaningful minutes the last year. So or even 2 years ago. So I'm willing to grant him a little bit of leeway, but I will say I agree. Like their offense seems like it's very like timing based. And the one thing that I have found is when they get knocked off their schedule, it just kind of all is flat. And like, for no reason at all, Georgia Southern was able to do that. They defensively, they've looked like crap in like, 9 of the 11 games they've played this season. They've looked terrible on the defensive side of the ball. For some reason, they just showed up and they were just clicking. Like they were getting pressure. They were calling the right, blitzes in spots. They were running stunts and things like that. And we haven't seen any of that. And I think that whatever they saw on tape, other teams have been able to take advantage of with ULM and now App. And so like, I'm going to grant Chesney some grace just because it is his first year. He's at the FBS level finally. It's a different ball game. It's a different thing with like NIL. Like there's a lot of adjustment that has to be made. But yeah, I think it's fair to kind of look at the offensive coordinator choice and go, it's kind of a TBD, man. Like we need to see more next season, or you might be the sacrificial lamb if this thing goes sideways.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
But here's the other thing. A couple of like weeks back, that JMU beat the ever loving crap out of Ball State, and I said, if Ball State was a better football team, they would have been able to take advantage of some of these opportunities that the JMU defense allowed them. And the games that JMU has lost, I mean, other than ULM, this game and the Georgia Southern game, like their defense is not great, frankly. No. Like it's fine-ish by Sunbelt standards, but it's not anything that you would be like, oh man, it's nothing like last year. And I know that that's a real tall task to kind of measure up, but it is absolutely nothing like what we saw out of them last year. Yeah. So that's kind of where it is. But the weird thing about this too is like, Joey Aguilar has been not great this season. Like he's had a really rough season overall, and he didn't even really play all that well in this game. He completed about half of his passes, threw for 216 and 2 scores. Good on him for not turning the ball over. But they're just, again, JMU's defense, not great. They took advantage, like you said, of like a block kick that got logged for some reason as a punt return for 9 yards, which seems like a scorer's error, but there's no fantasy football that we have to worry about on defense. So it's just like Aguilar hit like a long ball to Mekhi Jackson, and that was one of his touchdowns. And then, other than that, it was basically like all second quarter, they did all their damage, and then they kind of just hung out for the rest of the game.
Mhm.
Fantasy college football should be a thing. Just saying.
I actually had
think
this.
it is. I think it is
had
on
an
some
idea-
platforms.
Gosh, this was earlier this week, and it won't come to fruition until next season. But we should get the three of us, and then 3 or 4 more like Sunbelt creators, folks, and we may have to hands. Yeah, we may have to hand score it ourselves, but we should do like fantasy Sunbelt.
That would be
Sure.
interesting.
I think that'd be a fun idea.
Don't you will not.
Do we know any app developers?
We might just have to hand score it in Excel.
Yeah.
You will. So we'll basically have to do like best ball format, because the other great thing about college football is you have no idea who's out until literally the game starts. And then they'll just be like, hey, guess what? Your first round pick, AJ Turner, he's not even on the sideline for this game. So you can go ahead and mark that a goose egg, my brother.
he's in his apartment today. So cool.
Well, I was telling Matt, I don't know if you were aware of this, but last week, when Marshall beat, I think it was ODU, right? Was who they beat. AJ Turner was not only not playing, he wasn't even at the game. Like, he wasn't on the sideline. So, like, could you imagine? You can't even set like a lineup because there's no injury report. So you're just like, or you're like, oh man, I scooped Jordan McLeod. I really hope. Looks like Kenny just pulled him in the first quarter for no reason, and now it's a third string freshman is starting for the rest of the game. Like,
Sick.
you're just like, I don't know.
It was Coastal 2 weeks ago. You're talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Coastal 2 weeks ago. It was just like, yeah, AJ Turner's just not on the sideline. Like, okay,
Sick.
sounds great. Love it. All right. So with that, App moves to 5-5 with the win and is now 3-4 in the Sun Belt. JMU is now 8-3 and is now 4-3 in the conference. Let's get into this next one here. So Arkansas State was the most consistent team of all time because they scored 1 touchdown in each quarter, perfectly balanced, and beat UL Monroe 28-21. Jalen Rayner throws for 170 and 3 touchdowns. And I'm sorry, but Ahmad Hardy needs to file like a lawsuit or something against this offense, because this is like the second time in, I think, 3 weeks that he ran for 200 yards and multiple scores, and they lost like not even really all that well. Like, they didn't play all that well. And we obviously like are pretty down on Arminta as a quarterback and feel like they need to find another answer. And this game, just solidified that. He completed half of his passes for 137 and 1 touchdown, 1 pick. They got to do something else at the quarterback spot. Like, if you maybe go see if you can get Dexter Williams, who recently left the team from Georgia Southern. Like, this team feels like they are a quarterback away from being dangerous. And yet again, we don't get it. General Booty did not take the majority of the snaps in this game. So
all I'm gonna say is my Arkansas State haters sound real quiet right about now.
No, we don't.
That's
No,
all
we
I'm
don't.
gonna say. Y'all are real quiet right now.
No, we're not.
Butch Jones got them boys cooking. Let me tell you something. Let me talk to you, brother. Arkansas State has a better record than Texas State. Let that sink in for a moment.
No, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Butch Jones got them boys rolling. And I hate Arkansas State. I'm a Cajuns fan. I hate Arkansas State. But, I tried to tell y'all at the beginning of the season that this team was going to be sneaky good. I tried to tell y'all.
I never doubt. I didn't doubt them. I just was like, their defense needs to get better.
No,
that was the only analysis that I had.
This team is not sneaky good. They beat a tail-spinning ULM team. They were a
go.
Aiden Armenta's interception came on the last drive of the game. They just had to run the ball, get into the end zone. They couldn't do it. ULM threw an interception on the final drive. No, who is Arkansas beat? Arkansas State has wins against Georgia State, against Troy, against Southern Miss. I could beat those teams.
I miss this.
This is their own.
This is us.
This is their only notable win. And here's the thing: I have been on quite the tirade, because I am so opposed to like the 3-loss SEC narrative. I am disgusted by it, and I hate the
which end of it?
The idea that quality losses mean anything.
Oh, okay, all right. So you're on the right side of history. That's
yes,
fine.
I'm on the anti-SEC train in that regard.
Sure.
So I'm gonna perhaps double cross myself here. But congrats, you beat Georgia State by 7. You beat Troy by 3. I don't know, what is it about. Again, like the touchdown that gave Arkansas State the lead in this game was just going over the top of a ULM defense that was, I don't know if they weren't ready or if they're just stupid or what. But it's not like Arkansas State looked exceptional in this game. And I'm not going to let you get away with this. Oh, y'all are so quiet. This is the weakest 7-4 I have ever seen.
Well, hold on,
That's
Matt, before you jump back in. Before you jump back in, I don't think that's necessarily true, because last week you asked me if Georgia Southern was the worst bowl qualifying team in the country. So I don't know that that's necessarily true, because then you would have to decide on which one of those it is.
Here's the thing. Georgia Southern is the worst coached bowl eligible team, at the least.
I don't dispute that at all.
But I would argue Arkansas State.
So
yeah.
Zeke, my boy. In the NFL, the world's greatest prize is what?
The Super Bowl.
Which is, the trophy is named after who?
Oh, Vince Lombardi. Sorry, I was like,
and Vince Lombardi's most famous quote is, do you know? Let me enlighten you.
Wins championship.
Let me enlighten you. Winning isn't everything.
Yes, it is.
It's the only thing.
Oh.
All there is wins, baby. It don't matter how they come. That's what people gotta understand.
I concur. But I concur.
I don't necessarily agree with that, even, Matt. Like I'll make a case when we get to my game. I'll make a case.
All wins are not created equal. I will agree with Brian on that. But they do need to take precedent over everything else. They need to take precedent over everything else, and I agree with that. But you cannot.
Excuse my language. Who gives a shit if they're 7-4?
Because
they're 7-4.
It's so intellectually dishonest of you to imply that the Arkansas State haters are quiet.
Because they are quiet.
No, this is a bad team with bad wins. And I agree with you that winning is ultimately what matters.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
State from a bowl game just because their losses are.
So let me ask you this. What happens when they beat Old Dominion on Saturday? Because you have sat here and said Old Dominion's a good team.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I said Old Dominion. Oh. No, this is revisionist. Because I've sat here and told you that Old Dominion can find wins unlike any other team possible. But I have never once in my life been high on Old Dominion.
Okay, so say they beat Old Dominion, finish the regular season 8-4, and then go to a bowl game and win that. Say they finish 9-4. Then what you gonna say? You still gonna think they're a bad team?
I'm going to say Arkansas State earned their bowl win and their bowl appearance. I don't know if they would qualify for the SEC or the Sun Belt Championship if they go 8. I don't know how that would play. They would not. Let's say hypothetically they did. I would say that they earned that, but I'm not going to then say that it's a good team.
Zeke,
there are differences.
Can I hand you an escape rope here? Do you mind?
Maybe. You can try.
I think, and this goes back to the point I made last week a bit about Georgia Southern. This doesn't speak to the prowess of Butch Jones or Arkansas State. This speaks to how bad, or not bad, but this speaks to how much of a step back the conference has taken from last year to this year. Where it's like, think about the teams that sat at the top of last year's standings. Okay, JMU just lost their third game to an app team that's like barely getting over 500, or like needs to win. Yeah, no, they're at 500. They have to win next week to finish over 500. That team was in the East title game appearance last year. JMU, again, just lost their third game against, frankly, three opponents that now we've seen. Southern is super highly inconsistent. App speaks for itself, and ULM is on a backslide. Those are their three losses. The third team, you're like looking around and you're like, all right, so who's the third? Coastal's taken a step back. They're like a 500 football team now. They were 8-4 last year. So like, I think that speaks to more. The entire conference has taken like a level down, and it's like, yes, Louisiana is good, Matt. I will grant you that, but the rest of the conference is like, again, this is the question Zeke asked. He was like, "Are they the worst bowl eligible team in the conference?" And I was like, probably, but look at how many. There's like 3 bowl eligible teams in the whole conference. So yeah, of course, by default, yeah.
And while all of this is very true, I don't disagree with anything you just said. A team that wins 2/3 of their games cannot be a bad football team.
That's untrue.
There's no such thing.
I mean, there's no such thing. It's like, okay, let's go outside the Sun Belt. Do you think Liberty was a good team last year?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Well, I guess my question is, if a good team plays in a bad conference, does that make them a good team by default?
I'm not even.
You know what I mean?
Like obviously, Arkansas State would not compete with like the other, like the Power 5 or Power 4, whatever. Like that.
Goes
I don't,
without saying.
Matt. Yeah, Matt, you're not arguing that.
No, I'm not.
Right. I'm refuting this idea that Arkansas State would, over the long run, be a 7-4 team. Like if we ran this season over and over, Arkansas State is not 7-4 every year. I think they are at best 5 wins on average.
So you're saying this is like a 100th percentile like outcome for them, like the way that this season's gone.
That's asinine. That's asinine.
No.
I don't necessarily think I agree with that. Like I think if you ran this like Monte Carlo style, like you did it 1,000 times, I think they'd finish 6-6 more often than not. Like, look, if you were just like, let's take this Arkansas State team, let's put them basically in one of those like bingo things where they roll the balls, and you're like, let's put them in the 2020 Sun Belt Conference and see how they perform. It's like, whoa, they're taking a huge step back, or whatever. I think I think it's more of a point of like this whole conference, like a lot of the contributing teams have just taken a giant step back, and that has let, again, we'll talk about it with the Georgia Southern game, but that has let, hey, guess what? Clay Helton just broke his 6-win ceiling. Does that make him a great coach all of a sudden? He's one game over 500 in 3 seasons. So he has 3 wins in the month of November in 3 years.
But he's done a solid job this year.
I don't even necessarily think I agree. I don't even necessarily think I agree with that. And let's save that discussion for the Coastal discussion. But like with Georgia Southern Coastal. But like, I don't think I even necessarily agree with that. I think you have to look at like the broader context, and you can't just go, well, they've got more wins than losses, so they've got to be a good team. It's like, you have to look at the context behind it.
I agree with Matt, though, on this idea, and Brian, maybe you agree with this as well, that like they did win. Like, and ultimately you cannot discount that. And like, I'm not going to say, oh, Arkansas State doesn't deserve to be in a bowl game, right? They did win 7 games. They've earned that. And to get on my soapbox, whatever, like Indiana or Army or whatever, they won 10, 11 games. So they deserve to be in the college football playoffs. But to imply, but to imply then that means that they are a better team than a team with less wins, that is dishonest.
But that's not necessarily what the point I'm trying to make. I'm not saying that I think a 7-4 Arkansas State team is better than a 6-5 Texas State team.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that game happened 9 times or 10 times, Texas State wins it probably 7 times.
And they did.
But I can't sit here. I can't sit here and look at a 7-4 team, no matter how their wins and losses have come
Mm-hmm.
after everything that they've gone through the last couple of seasons. Right now, because if we're going to look at the previous seasons and factor that in, I can't look at a 7-4 Arkansas State team and say they've had a bad year. I just can't.
No, they haven't had a bad year by any stretch. But I think the point is not all 7 or 8 win teams are created equal.
Oh, I would agree with that.
So that was more the point I was making. All right, let's get back to the actual game at hand. Like, we've done a lot of arguing about Arkansas State. Courtney Jackson was good in this one. 6 catches, 69 yards, including a 44-yard touchdown with 7:58 to go that iced this game for them. ULM, I said this, I think, either last week or 2 weeks ago. I feel like they need to clear the quarterback room out and just start from scratch. Like, find an FCS transfer, or like, I don't know what their recruiting looks like from the high school ranks, but like, find somebody, try to find like a Colt. It's not easy to find a Colton Joseph, but like, try to find just 3 guys that you think could compete honestly for the position, and then sell them on, hey, we can tailor this offense around you. You want to run, bootleg action, like we got Ahmad Hardy running the football. You want to sling it all over the yard, like we could form the offense like around what you want to do. And like, I think you could sell it in that way and be like, listen, you could either be a cog in the machine or a star. Like that, it's up to you, depending on how you want to play this. So like, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for them to Bryant Vincent to sell incoming potential like transfers or high school recruits on this spot and be like, it's an open job. Like, if you want it, go take it, like in spring practice or whatever, because we don't have anybody really. So
I think it's difficult because this position is a lot less sexier when this defense is not good. And ULM started defensively exceptionally. But now I'm looking at you and I'm like, you've given up, 28 points at least in the last 5 games. You gave up 28 to Marshall, 38 to Texas State, 46 to South Al. Like, now I'm in the position where I don't want to be a quarterback like Colton Joseph, where I am the star, but I don't have any support.
Well, I think part of it too, and you would never know this unless you were like in the locker room, but I think a part of this too is like, maybe the defense has gotten tired of trying to carry them to every single victory and been like, offense, you're on the field too for half the game. It would be nice if you kind of chipped in occasionally and we wouldn't have to hold teams to under 17 points every week in order to win games. And the offense is basically like, chewing on a nail in the corner, like, being like, we don't know what's going on. So again, it's like, other than Ahmad Hardy, here's their total list of offensive contributors. That's it. That's Ahmad Hardy. Like, that's the offense. So again, if they want to be a serious contender, they need to try to find a way to make a move. Like, Texas State didn't necessarily even need to kind of upgrade at the quarterback spot last year, but they did anyway. So I think a big part of that is you can make a big jump if you bring a quarterback in that's like worth his salt. And right now they just don't have that guy on the roster. So if we're all good on this one, all good. Arkansas State is now 7-4 and 5-2 in conference play. UL Monroe drops to 5-6 and is now 3-4 in the conference. We don't have to spend a lot of time on the South Alabama Southern Miss game. I think the biggest takeaway I had was, wow, Southern Miss might have a semblance of a pulse, or at least they did in the first half when it was 14-11. But frankly, they got outscored 21-3 in the second half. This has kind of just been run of the mill stuff from Southern Miss. Before Will Hall was fired, after, it's just kind of all been like, everybody just seems like they're ready for next Saturday at, I don't even know what time they play. Next Saturday at 4, there's probably going to be champagne popped in that locker room because the season's over. Like, they seem like a team of 85 guys or however many are on a team that are just ready to be done with this season. And I can't really blame them. This has been a season from hell for them.
are in the position that you just described with ULM, where they need to go shopping for a quarterback. They need to do that with literally every position on the football team, in the coaching staff, adjacent to the football team. This team needs new janitors. They need new equipment managers.
We
They
need
need
new people washing the uniforms.
They need a new 8-year-old to run out and grab the kickoff tee.
Burn it down.
And they needed to do so 2 years ago.
Do they need a new football stadium too, or?
Because I know a guy who will fund that.
Is that place just condemned now?
He may steal from Peter to pay Paul, but yeah,
Oh!
he can do that.
At first, I didn't catch your reference, but I got it now. Yikes! Well done, Zeke.
Thank you.
Oh man, God.
Gio Lopez looked good.
I'm gonna try
3
to find
touchdown
something nice
passes.
to say about Southern Miss.
No,
Rodriguez Clark. He's
Clark.
They scored more points than they have losses.
Hey,
Good job. Bravo, Golden Eagles.
Great job. Great job, everyone.
Look, it's one of those things where, obviously you want to win, but like, does winning your final game when you're 1-10 give you any hope going into what's the difference between 2-10 and 1-11? Like,
I would say no, because the next head coach is probably going to come in and be like, yeah, you guys can all. He's going to be like Dion when he went into Colorado, and it's like, you guys can like hit the door. Like, I'm good.
Y'all can all go.
Y'all could go screw. Like, I do not care. Like, here's a lift coupon. Like, get out of here. So there's nothing positive to take away from this season at Southern Miss. Like, you didn't uncover really anything of note. You didn't find anything out about yourself. The only thing you found out is what happens when you fire a guy 1 year too late versus it maybe a year too early. And even I can't make that excuse, because everybody, including us and everything I saw online, was like, yeah, no, I'm ready for Will Hall to kick rocks, like after the end of last season. And it didn't happen. They were like, commitment to excellence in their little letter from the AD, and it mattered all for nothing. Like, they basically, pardon my French, pissed away an entire football season for really no reason. And you see where that gets you. So but yeah, Pritchett for South Alabama, 102 yards on 8 catches, 1 touchdown. That was good for them. This was basically just them kind of toying with their food, I feel like, in the first half. And then the second half, they were really like, all right, let's get serious. And then they just kind of laid the hammer down. I think South Alabama is a pretty good football team when they take the game seriously. But even going back to when they lost to Southern, they outscored Southern in the third quarter of that game 17-0, and then got outscored 20-0 in the fourth quarter. And it was just like Applewhite just went brain dead. Matt, I don't know if this goes back to what you were hearing preseason, but their play calling in the fourth quarter, sometimes they just go brain dead, and it doesn't make any sense. Like that game, especially, they were doing really well mixing it up, and then they were like, hey, let's let Gio Lopez launch moon balls and scramble, and that's basically all we're gonna do. So if they take it seriously and actually pretend like they're planning for things, they seem to be pretty good. But it's just you never know what you're gonna get, and that's kind of been the recurring theme for a lot of these Sunbelt teams. But either way, South Alabama improves to 6-5 and is now 5-2 in the Sun Belt. Southern Miss drops to 1-10, is now 0-7 in the conference. Getting into the next one here, Georgia Southern went into Conway and basically dominated Coastal Carolina 26-6. Vasco and Noah Kim combined, I think, had 118 yards passing between the two of them. Both of them were an absolute disaster. And that's single-handedly that, and French played way better than anything I've seen out of him in the last couple weeks. The opening drive, they ended up having to settle for a field goal, but I went back today and watched that series, and he was just dealing the whole way down the field. It was the announcers for this game were not good. Let me go ahead and say that now. But they kept saying he's throwing it in the perfect spot. Like the defenders for Coastal, like McDoom and those guys, they literally cannot make plays on these balls. He's throwing back shoulder things that look like, for one game, look like old Aaron Rodgers throwing back shoulder fades. So it was just like, he hit that long ball to Marcus Sanders that kind of broke it open early. And frankly, Coastal's an unserious team. They already fired their offensive coordinator weeks ago. People for Coastal that I've seen online, and you can take this with a grain of salt, are already kind of being like, Tim Beck, kick rocks, buddy. So yeah, Coastal might be going through kind of the post success era that the Troys of the world and those types of teams have really taken a step back right after, and they're kind of seeing that as well post Chadwell and I guess McCall now.
So Brian, let me ask you, because I'm going to be quick on my thoughts. I thought Georgia Southern played an excellent game, and Coastal just looked, ooh. But how hard will you be cheering for Marshall to lose on Saturday? Because if you guys win and Marshall loses, you're in the championship game.
I'm definitely going to be cheering for them to lose. However, if they win, I will feel absolutely no sympathy for this Georgia Southern team. Like they played Old Dominion with their control of their own destiny in their hands, and they got blown off the field like the week before Halloween. Okay, so you can be like, all right, one game, whatever. Okay, last week, the Troy game, they go into that game once again with control in their hands. All they have to do is win 3 games at the end of the season to go to the Sun Belt title game, and they totally blew it. So, like, I will be cheering for Marshall to lose, but if Marshall doesn't lose, I'm going to be playing the world's smallest violin for Georgia Southern, because I'm just like, you guys have had chance after chance. The universe has gifted you opportunities, and you're basically like, no, I don't want that. Like slapping it out of its hands. So I'm just like, I don't feel bad for them if they don't end up going. It's 100% for their own doing. And like now, one of the offensive linemen for Southern on Twitter has been getting really vocal about like, don't jump back on the bandwagon if we start winning again. Where was this when y'all played Old Dominion and Troy? Like, where was all of this? Like, you have all this swagger now. Okay, great. You've single-handedly eliminated yourself from the conference race twice now. So maybe put a cork in it and be like, hey, man, we should have won those 2 games. So that's what I mean is like, I don't have any sympathy for this team because they have blown every opportunity that they've had. And Matt, going back to what you were saying earlier, we could talk about this now about the Arkansas State team. I don't think that necessarily because Georgia Southern has 7 wins that they are like a well-coached team at all. Like, if you watch the games that they play in, it's like, okay, the teams that they've beat are like Coastal, JMU. We've seen how inconsistent JMU can be. You've seen Marshall feels like more and more of a total fluke aberration game that shouldn't have happened. They beat Georgia State, who's sitting at one of the worst teams in the conference. So, like, even when you go back and look through their resume, it's like, okay, like the teams that you beat, not great or very inconsistent, and the teams that you lost to, you've lost to Old Dominion, who's inconsistent and had a good week, and you lost to Troy, who again is one of the worst teams in the conference. So I don't necessarily think like, oh, they've won 7 games, they're a well-coached team. Like, defensively, especially not. Like, I can't make excuses for their defense.
2 thoughts. One, I'm glad you brought up the offensive lineman on Twitter thing, because I don't know why he's going to bat so hard. First of all, bro, you've played at 4 schools in 4 years. Not a joke. Transferred into Georgia State last season. The year before that was at Eastern Illinois, and the year before that, I think he was playing FCS. So it's just like I'm uncertain where the live and die loyalty to the coach and program is coming from. Has a team, because you'll remember last year when Grayson McCall was in the portal, it was going to be Ethan Vasco.
Yeah.
So has there been a team as wrong about their quarterback going into a season in the Sun Belt than No, that's untrue because it would be Marshall.
Yeah.
But it's just fascinating how.
Or may I raise you another one? Do y'all remember the guy that played at Southern Miss last year, Billy Wiles?
Yeah.
Oh, that was bad.
Well, they've not had a good quarterback, and God knows
That was
how
bad.
long.
I mean, Zeke, we talked about it last week. Southern Miss brought in Tate Rodemaker from Florida State and was like, "We're healed. It's cured."
Right. Well, hell, I remember saying when they brought Rodemaker in, I was like, "Oh man, Southern Miss might actually figure some things out."
I was the same way.
I was wrong.
I was the exact same way. I'm baffled how wrong Coastal has got this quarterback situation, and now they are in a unwinnable position where everyone that they're willing to utilize and not waste a red shirt or are Ethan Vasco and Noah Kim the only quarterbacks on the roster, because we've not seen them try anyone else. Which again,
I don't
me.
really understand what they're doing. It seems like they are just like, we're gonna keep doing this if it kills us, and I'm like, great. Here's the knife. Like,
right.
I'm like, I don't really know what to do.
Let's carry this along.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, again, French played really well in this one. I will say Bennett for Coastal did a really good job on the ground, 138 on 16 carries. But when your quarterback is throwing for like, I think through 3 quarters, Vasco had like 60 yards passing. So like that should let you know where we were at. Like they were down multiple scores and he couldn't crack 75 yards through the first 3 quarters. And I've complained about French, but French makes Vasco look like, I mean, plate gold. Like it's just like, oh man, like we can't say no to this great find that we've uncovered. And it's like I look over at Ethan Vasco and I'm like, yeah, we could be on Davis Brin again. You know, it could be a lot worse.
yeah, it could be.
So yeah, Georgia Southern is now 7-4 and is 5-2 in the Sun Belt. Coastal drops to 5-6 and is now 2-5 in the conference. Matt, okay, so Louisiana beats Troy 51-30. I have a question for you.
Oh Lord,
what do we take away from this 3-week stretch for the Cajuns? Because you have a blowout dominant victory against Arkansas State 3 weeks ago. You lose last week to South Alabama in a game that, frankly, you were playing catch up the whole time. So, like, you can kind of take that and kind of shove it off to the side and be like, we really weren't in the game. Like, it was 24-3, and you were just kind of trying to do your best to chip away. And then you blow Troy out in this game. So, I'm going to ask this when the preview for the next week comes up, but, like, is this the start of like a concerning pattern of like 1 week we play like world beaters and the next week it's are we going to score points?
Well, look, here's the thing. UL won this game by 21, but it wasn't pretty early on. I mean, UL went right down the field early and got a 85-yard drive in 3 minutes, scored a touchdown, but then Troy answered with back-to-back touchdown drives. And it was 14-7 Troy at the end of the first quarter. And then that's when UL kind of, put their foot on the gas. It was all UL in the second quarter, took a 34-14 lead into the half with 27 unanswered points. But then they let Troy right back into the game. Troy converted back-to-back 2-point conversions, and it was 37-30 again. And then if it wasn't for a 96-yard kickoff return right there in the fourth quarter, I really think that game could have gotten even more out of hand than it was, right? And look, going back to the South Alabama game, I think UL simply came out flat. South Alabama took advantage, and then, like you said, the Cajuns spent the rest of the game playing catch-up and nearly pulled it off, right? It is concerning, but, when you look at some external factors, right? Ben Woodridge goes down last week with an injury. Now we know that it's a broken collarbone and he's done for the year. And so now, you've got Chandler Fields, who look, let's be honest, the Cajuns probably have one of the best, quarterback situations in the conference.
Easily.
You lose your 7th-year senior. Let's turn it over to the 6th-year senior. Like, okay. So, like, obviously the experience is there no matter which way you slice it. It is concerning that games have kind of gone this way. And look, you're going to go up, and we're going to talk about next week's game here in a little bit, but you're going to go up and play a Monroe team who has been on a 5-game skid.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're staring bowl eligibility in the face. They're going to be motivated. They're going to be ready to play. They have something to play for. And the Cajuns have something to play for too, right? Their spot in the championship game is not shored up. It's not clinched yet. And so they still have something to play for too. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup on Saturday in Monroe. But Brian, no, I do, to answer your question, I am concerned with the way that this Cajuns team has played over the last couple of weeks.
Matt, the more that you talked about it, the situation going for Louisiana, the more that I found that it directly reflects what Georgia Southern is going through. Like, literally, like, word for word, I was going, this sounds really familiar. Like, this is weird.
I've lived
exactly
this before.
Well, it's like, okay, App is playing for bowl eligibility next week. We played App at home, and it's like, we're not a shoe-in for the conference championship game like you mentioned earlier. So we have to win, which usually means we find a way to lose. And I mean, frankly, like that's what it always is with Helton. And again, we need to have the Marshall game go our way, but it's like that sounds very familiar to that
Right.
Sounds like the exact situation that Louisiana's in right now. Zeke, did you have anything for this?
I'm fascinated by what appears to me to be a turnaround from Troy over the past several weeks. They've got both of their FBS and conference wins against Coastal and Southern. They gave UL, for the first half, gave UL some difficulty. And granted, where I stand on Arkansas State. About a month ago, only lost to 3 to Arkansas State. And this was a team that for several weeks, especially in the beginning of conference play, I considered to be the worst team in the conference. And outside of Southern Miss, granted. But that's a given. So I'm curious, this is fascinating to me. I think Matthew Caldwell has really figured it out in the past couple weeks.
He's impressive, man.
Yeah. It's a shame that they started the year with Goose Crowder and went back to him after Crowder got healthy because they went to Crowder to start the year, gave it to Caldwell. Crowder came back and then lost it again.
Then got hurt again. He's out for the year, yeah.
But then they didn't give it back to Caldwell. They gave it to Tucker Kilcrease. So it's a shame they took so long to officially give him the job. He's figuring things out, and it looks like Troy is kind of settling in the inverse way that ULM has done with their new coach, where ULM got hot and now they're skidding. Granted, they're 2-2 over the past 4 weeks. Troy's starting to string together some more impressive performances, and that's really impressed me.
Well, the thing that I saw was that apparently they've had a really hard time keeping their offensive line healthy. Like they've had, from what I've seen Troy fans say, and Troy fans feel free to chime in, which you can do at our YouTube page. We have comments open, so if you want to chime in. The one thing that I've seen is they've had like an unholy number of offensive line combinations this season, and people have just been like, there hasn't been any chemistry amongst the offensive line until literally, I think like 3 or 4 weeks ago, someone said. So it makes sense. And Zeke, that was the thing when you asked, has there been a more, ill-intentioned quarterback's position? And I'm like, honestly, I could name a bunch of them off the top of my head in the conference, like literally over the last 2 years. Like you have Troy, what they did this year. You have both JMU and App last year who picked the wrong guy initially and only really benefited because that guy got hurt or was underperforming. We would have not known Jordan McLeod's name if Barnett had played like he had this year. So like Caldwell's kind of the same way, where it's like you picked the wrong guy initially, then you remade the mistake, then you made it a second time with a different guy, and now you're kind of back on the right track. But I don't know how much of that is offensive line wise, but they have finally found Caldwell as kind of an answer because they were really struggling at the quarterback position like early. Yeah, I think the other thing is their defense just has to be better, like in general. I mean, their defense has to be a reason for a good bit of these losses. Like they're kind of outside of their 2 conference wins, they're really struggling to like stop anyone. And it's like even this game, you're like, oh, they're playing pretty well. They allowed 51 points, so like that only kind of goes so far. So. And I know Matt was like, there was a kick return, but like that's 7 of 51. There's still 44 that are just like, you got to find something else. Matt, I didn't watch this game. Did Parker do his patented pull up for 3 in a really easy spot where they could have just gone for it and got it? Because that's been kind of his calling card.
Not really, no. I mean, there was one scenario where I felt like they probably could have gone for it. But no, for the most part, I thought his play calling was pretty solid. I mean, all of their points came via the touchdown. So look, I think it was one of those things where, you know, they looked a little more aggressive. They took a lot of shots to the end zone, which was nice to see. Look, Matthew Caldwell's got a nice arm. He was making some really nice throws in this game. And I think, I know he's a junior, but I think, you know, if you develop him in the offseason and fully give him the keys to this offense next year, I think Troy could be a much improved football team in 2025.
What year is he? Does anybody know?
Caldwell's a junior.
Okay. So he's got maybe another year ahead of him. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. Well, they might have an answer at the quarterback spot for next year. You just have to address like the 11 players on defense. So good luck with that. All right. So Louisiana with the win moves to 9-2 and is now 6-1 in the Sun Belt. Troy drops to 3-8, is now 2-5 in the conference. Zeke, what the hell happened with Georgia State?
Bro, hold on. Before you break down the game, can I just say thank you? Thank you. Because now Texas State is completely out of the equation. GJ Kinney is a fraud. I said what I said. Texas State has provided nothing to the conference, with all due respect. You've provided nothing to the conference. Give me one thing outside of a basketball championship and a baseball championship that Texas State has provided to the conference. Cricket.
I mean, those would probably be their answers.
That's what I thought. So thank you very much, Zeke. You can continue.
Matt, first, before we talk about the game, Matt, I think it was you that brought it up. This was several weeks ago where GJ Kinney didn't show up for a press conference. Was that him?
Yes.
Because
fraud.
Can I hold on? Can I chip in on that?
Yeah.
So when I posted the TikTok for that, someone commented that doesn't follow us on our account, which is x.com/@warmweatherfans. And was like, this is fake news. You guys, apparently Kef Ciradello or whatever the guy's name was, apparently explained it later in a follow-up tweet, but I don't follow that guy, and he tweets 20,000 times a day, and I'm just I can't comb back through every single tweet that he's ever sent. I'm sorry, guys.
So I follow up or bring this up because I cannot confirm this. I was not there in the press conference, but I read that on their senior night game, on the night that Jordan McLeod set several program passing records, it was a junior and a sophomore available to the media. And it was interesting because I saw what I perceived to be some frustration with how this GJ Kinney regime has handled their media appearances. Football-wise, I don't know.
Their defense is cheeks.
Dude, both defenses are cheeks. For most of this game, the team, it was in the second quarter is when Georgia Georgia State scored a bulk of its points. It had 3 touchdowns, all passes to Dorian Fleming, and then a field goal at the end of the half. But then after that, it was Georgia State's turn to kind of hot potato and say, well, we don't want to play defense anymore. It's your turn. Go ahead and score points. Baffling. I think Georgia State, this is not like some sleeping giant that Georgia State has had and that was unleashed against Texas State. I think this is a Texas State team that, as Matt said, may potentially be fraudulent. Is certainly fraudulent in my eyes based on what I thought about them earlier in the year.
He makes sense.
That was not ready for Georgia State to play football. This is the Freddie Brock week that I've been prepping you for all year. He ran for 133 yards on 18 carries. But even still, like, you scored 52 and you couldn't pull it out. This has been the difficulty with Georgia State all year. When we were making the picks last week, Brian, I took the over, I believe, because
I think you did.
I'm fairly sure I did, because Texas State, we knew was going to score points because this Georgia State, but Georgia State has always been scoring 21, 28 a week. It's been the defense that has been the crux of this issue and the reason they only have 2 FBS wins this season. I don't know. Christian Valaire looked legitimate. This is a performance that I've been waiting all year for from him, and it gives me hope for next season. That as a senior, he may be able to, take the brunt of the offense, unlike he has in recent weeks, where he was splitting time with Zach Gibson, who missed this game presumably with injury. May have left the team. We're not really sure. I'm pretty sure he's a senior or has no eligibility, so don't know really the ins and outs of that. Happy to answer any questions, but this was just Sunbelt football. This is what it's about. Freaky, weird stuff like this happening.
Well, I have one question that's for both of you, and then I have a second question specifically for Zeke, and I'm going to get to the question for both of you. I posed this a couple weeks ago, but I'm gonna reiterate. Should we start looking at GJ Kinney in the same way that we look at, we had looked at Clay Helton the last couple years and say the second half of the season, this team goes to the dumps. Like, they start very hot, and then all of a sudden it's when it's gone in the second half of the season, it is gone.
I know we don't have as large of a sample size as these two coaches that I'm about to compare GJ Kinney to, but I feel like it's slowly starting to develop, and I want to get your. I'll answer your question, and then I want to get your thoughts on this. Is GJ Kinney approaching the same level as Lane Kiffin and James Franklin?
Like Temu brand.
Well, I mean, sure, right? But like, what I mean is a team that came into the season with so much expectation, and they were so hyped, right? And they have fell flat on their face in terms of living up to it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody raved, oh, Penn State might be a real, competitor to Ohio State and Oregon in the Big Ten. No.
Yeah.
Oh, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss might finally end Kirby Smart's reign of terror on the SEC. No. Like, it's kind of feeling the same way to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point.
But no, going back to the
sorry.
No, go ahead.
The reason I said Temu brand though is at least by and large, and there are obviously exceptions with Lane Kiffin and James Franklin. But I actually don't even think they're really that similar. James Franklin basically can't beat 2 teams. Like, he basically can't beat Michigan or Ohio State. And like, if they're playing anybody else, it's like, okay, we're probably going to win. The thing with Kinney that separates him from those other teams and those other coaches, though, are they find ways to lose to teams like Georgia State, where we had kind of left them for dead. And like, say what you want, like I know Ole Miss lost to Kentucky and Florida, but like by and large, those are competent football teams. They're not losing to like, I guess, knock on wood, they're not losing to like the Mississippi States of the world, where it's like these are the true like bottom feeders. Like GJ Kinney is losing to, and no offense to Georgia State and their program, they've been like a bottom feeder this year. So the fact that Kinney is losing to them, I think, should be of real concern, considering like, is he going to field a team better than this offense in the next couple years? What if he doesn't? What does it look like then? Like, is it a 4-win team, 5-win team? Like, I don't know.
I think if the West continues to dip, though, because I don't know what Louisiana's window looks like, but like Texas State in its iteration, in this current iteration, like it clears obviously Southern Miss in the West. It beat Arkansas State very heavily, but it may just depend on what time of the season, because if Arkansas State played Texas State next week, I wouldn't be as confident that Texas State would beat them 41-9. ULM is in a backslide, and we're kind of reconsidering that team's trajectory. South Al is very nebulous. So while I agree, like my general stock on Texas State and GJ Kinney is down, like they might be in a position, just given like the current landscape, that this might be enough. And it depends on Louisiana's trajectory. Like Louisiana right now is by far the best team in the West without peers, and probably in the East as well, probably in the whole conference. But as soon as UL starts to slip, like, shoot, if Texas State could beat a UL team if they score 54 points, right? So unlike Arkansas State, which is built in the similar archetype of offense, and the defense can we'll see what happens. I think like Texas State just does it better, and in the right year, this could work for them.
Okay, so I have one last question, and it's specifically for Zeke before we move on from this game. I'm not looking to bring back up that you picked them to go undefeated into the CFP, but
all right.
But no, the question is, what did we learn about trying to select a team to be in that kind of spot from picking Texas State this year? I want to give you the floor, and then I'm going to tell you what the answer basically is. So what did we learn? Like, you picked Texas State to run away with it. What did we learn about selecting these types of teams?
Well, before you answer, Zeke, I just gotta say, Brian, you're such a father. Like, you are the guy sitting there with his 5-year-old going, "You messed up. What did we learn from this? Like, how do we avoid doing this in the future?"
Yeah,
and because look. And also your tone sounded like, I'm going to ask you, Zeke, for your opinion, and then I'm going to tell you the correct answer and why your opinion's wrong.
Yeah, Brian, I know there is some combination of words you're digging for. I'll tell you what I learned. I learned that I think I learned that GJ Kinney and coaches in general need longer to establish dominance. That type of dominance. I learned that, and I learned this with ULM this season as well, that flashes in the pan can happen. They will happen, especially in the Sun Belt, where the parity is much higher. I learned that Jordan McLeod, possibly fraudulent. And I
don't necessarily think I'd say that, but
I think the general overall lesson is I don't know what you're digging at. I was wrong. I don't know what you want me to learn.
It wasn't so much about this specific team. It was more like an archetype of a team. It was. I don't necessarily think I agree with the Kinney point, because you could have made the same argument about Signetti, and nothing like that didn't come back to bite them. So about having a longer runway, the answer that I was kind of fishing for was taking a team like this that clearly has a lot of question marks on defense is maybe not the best course of action, because again, we said in the preseason, we were like, they probably, if you look at just talent perspective, they probably have the most talented offense. But defensively, when you've got one player of note in Ben Bell, who, he left the team, so like whatever, but a defensive end is not going to totally save your entire defense.
Right.
So even if he was still on the team, I can't say that any of these games end up differently. So I think it's more just saying, like, if you're like feeling good about a team and you look at one side of the ball and you kind of just, wave away all the concerns, I think that's kind of where I am with it, is like, I just in good conscience can't take a team where I'm like, I can't name any of their defensive players.
I hear what you're saying. And I think that is a valid point to bring up. But as you look at Texas State's schedule, and especially their losses this year, granted, this does not include last week's Georgia State loss, which I feel comfortable calling an outlier. Any performance like that is an outlier. Texas State has lost its games not because of poor defensive performances. And again, as I look through their schedule, Georgia State and Sam Houston are the two games you can point to and say, poor defense lost to this team this games. UL, they only scored 17. They held UL to 23. You should be able to win. Like, 23 points allowed is a very winnable game. 24 points against Old Dominion, that is a winnable game. So I hear what you're saying, and I know you're telling me this so I don't burn myself in the same way next year.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to listen to you, because as I look at this team and I look at this schedule and I look at, like, shoot, against UL,
hey,
like,
listen,
if Jordan McLeod's playing that game, that's a different game.
Listen, my 4-year-old has some of the same tendencies you do. Like, one day we told her, we were like, don't touch my wife's like curling iron. And we told her and told her and told her, and she walked up and touched it and burnt herself. And I said, I guess she's one of those just has to learn by doing it. So I guess you're just going to keep sticking a fork in the electrical outlet and just hope for a different result next time. So,
hey, this is fun.
Yeah. Hey, I can feel my teeth vibrating.
It's kind of a fun feeling. It's worth a try.
Yeah, sometimes you need to feel alive. All right, so Georgia State moves to 3-8 with the win, 1-6 in the conference. Texas State is now 6-5 and 4-3 in the Sun Belt. Last game of the night, this one was Marshall continues to play in these incredibly compelling games. They did it last week. They did it again this week against Old Dominion. So they win 42-35. Once again for Old Dominion, I mean, how many times have we got to say it's the Colton Joseph show? And it's basically just him on an island by himself. He's got like one receiver, and then some weeks Aaron Young, the running back, shows up. Some weeks he doesn't. And it's basically like, hey guys, have you guys seen the meme where it's like 4 people and they're talking, and then there's one guy off to the side, and it's like 4 people are like, help, we need help. This is the total inverse of that. Colton Joseph's like, please God, can someone else contribute? And then the 4 of them are like, yay, this is fun. And like they're losing a game. So this is kind of what it is like, Marshall is obviously a better built team. They have a better, this game didn't necessarily reflect it, but I think Colton Joseph's a very good quarterback. They have a better defense overall. They seem like they have a better head coach, infrastructure from the top down. And this goes back to the Ricky Ronnie discussions we have, it feels like every single season, which is, okay, you're not going to qualify for a bowl game. You're going to top out at 5 wins max. If you lose next week, you might finish 4-8. At what point you got to have some expectations, right? Like, you got to be like, we want to accomplish something. And it seems like every year it's just like, I don't know. I hope we go out there for 12 weeks and play football, and that's as far as it goes. So I don't really understand what we're doing here in Norfolk.
Look,
I mean, the fact that you guys are just kind of like, I don't know, I'm like, that's exactly what I mean.
well, it's true, right? How do you put a finger on what's happening? I mean, this Colton Joseph kid has been incredible, right? He's a great passer. He runs the ball really well. But he's kind of doing it kind of like Ahmad Hardy and Monroe, right? He doesn't have anybody else.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're on a 3-game losing skid. And but look, as crazy as this might sound, because they have been so bad under Ricky Ronnie, I still feel like they might be going in the right direction.
See, now you're doing the I need to touch the curling iron thing. Like now
I know, but like you've got this freshman quarterback that you have discovered that's like, okay, if we can spend the offseason putting some receivers and offensive line around him, you might have something here.
I don't know.
Well, hold on.
I can't imagine
1 second.
Colton Joseph plays there next year.
What? Yeah, that was literally what I was going to say. Is I think there's a better chance it goes the other way, and some small P4 or maybe a bigger G5, like a Memphis or something, comes calling and is like, "Hey, we've got these NIL funds. How do you feel about leaving this team behind and coming to play with a team that's actually got pieces around you?" I think that's more likely than they restock the entire cabinet around him.
Hey, Colton, you sound like a young man that would drive a Ford F-150 Raptor. How do you feel about getting one from Bob Daly Ford?
Right.
Here
Chad Pennington Chevrolet.
Right. Come play football for us. We'll paint it blue for you.
Yeah, really. So that's my question, and Zeke brought it up as well, which is, I think there's a better shot that he pulls. No offense, Matt. I don't mean to poke it like an open wound, but he pulls like a Zion Chris and is like, I'm out of town, man. Like y'all, and it made less sense. I mean, I guess he got an NIL bag either way, but it made less sense with a team like Louisiana than it does with a team like Old Dominion, where it's like, this is a one-man squad. Like if he doesn't throw for 300 yards and run for 100 more every week, they've basically got no shot.
And they don't even have a shot when he does do that.
Right. That's the thing that like is like, if I'm Colton Joseph, I'm looking around going, would these guys be starting anywhere else if they weren't here next to me? Probably not. But I will say Braylon Braxton did his thing on the other side as well. So he threw for 210 and 3 scores and then added 18 carries for 140 yards. AJ Turner was back for this game, so he's not totally. I still don't really understand what happened last week with him, but he is still in the mix. They had 471 yards of offense. Old Dominion had 513 yards of offense and lost this game. Now they did turn the ball over twice, but still. And again, not even talking about the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, I think Jason Henderson's kind of the same thing on the defensive side of the ball. He's probably looking around going, would any of these guys be starting at the FBS level if they weren't here next to me? Probably not. So I don't really know. I don't really know. They basically have a 2-man team. They're trying to run like a basketball style roster on a football team where it's like we've got two guys, and it's like, all right, on a basketball team that works, but when there's 22 spots, a lot less.
Does Monroe have any sort of NIL bag to throw? Because imagine how good those teams are though with a quarterback like Colton Joseph or Braylon Braxton. Like, shoot, that ULM team is winning how many games if they just have a competent quarterback?
8,
true.
9.
It's true.
Yeah,
I mean, they would be. I think they if you took Colton Joseph, I'm going to say him specifically because Braylon Braxton, some games he kind of fades and you're just kind of like, what's he up to? But Colton Joseph really has to put the team on his back like every week. And I feel like if you took him and like Claw picked him up, dropped him onto the ULM team, I think you're looking at like an 8 or 9 win team. Like no joke. And I just and Old Dominion's probably a 1-2 win football team without Colton Joseph back there.
They're Colton Joseph away from being Southern Miss.
Yeah,
Ooh, Jesus.
exactly. So again, if Old Dominion just wants to keep doing this with Ricky Ronnie every year, no matter what the roster is, results seem to kind of be the same regardless. And they have had, with Ollie Jennings and Blake Watson and all those guys, they've had contributors in the past dip out because they were frankly like, either y'all don't have the NIL or I'm tired of playing on like a one-man team. So we'll see what Colton Joseph does this offseason. It's gonna be really interesting if they can get him to stick around or not. But Marshall made another statement that they are not giving up the conference lead anytime soon. They are now 8-3 and 6-1 in the Sun Belt. Old Dominion drops to 4-7 and is now 3-4 in the conference. So let's kick it off, kick it to next week's games. Before we do so, you can find us on Twitter, or X, I guess, x.com/warmweatherfans. We are live on YouTube right now. So next week we are scheduled to go live again next Sunday night. So we'll be talking about the season finale games and get you kind of our initial thoughts on the conference championship matchup. But yeah, let's go ahead. So Black Friday, we've got a game on ESPN Plus at 3:30. Texas State is traveling to South Alabama. South Alabama is a 1-point home favorite, over under 61.5. Give me the over 61.5. I think both of these teams can score points. Texas State's defense, like we said, is absolute cheeks. And without Ben Bell, they can't even get pressure on the quarterback. And so I think Gio Lopez is going to have all kinds of time to throw. And South Alabama, frankly, can also short circuit their own brain, which I talked about. So Jordan McLeod might be able to throw for some serious yardage as well. So I'm taking the over.
Same.
I like South Al here. Just to get back
Okay.
at my ex-girlfriend. Don't like you anymore, Texas State.
Goal!
This is like back in the day, like in elementary school. It's like someone used to send you a note. It's like, do you like me? Yes, no. And you're just checking the no box and handing them the note back.
Absolutely.
They hurt me, man. They hurt me.
They hurt you. It broke your heart. It's always the first ones that get you. Saturday on ESPNU at noon Eastern time, Louisiana is traveling to Monroe. Louisiana is a 9.5-point favorite. Over unders 48.5. Matt, I'm going to let you go first because I would like to know your thoughts on it because you are more in line. I can't keep up with what Louisiana's doing. 1 week I picked them and they get basically blown off the ball against South Alabama, and then last week I was like, I like the other team to keep it Troy to keep it close, and then they just blow them out. So like, I need to know your thoughts on this game before I make a pick because frankly, I have no finger on the pulse of this Louisiana team.
I'm sorry that I'm squirming around like this. My wife just cracked open the office door and threw something at me. So anyways. Look, no, I think the Cajuns go on the road and get a win. I don't think it's going to be pretty. There is some juju about Malone Stadium that always makes things interesting. And look, obviously, we talked about it earlier. ULM is going to be playing for something, right? They've got bowl eligibility on the line. I think the Cajuns are the better team, and I think they're going to go up there. Ahmad Hardy's going to get his right, but I think the Cajuns are able to bend but don't break from that aspect, and they're able to eke out a close one.
So wait, do you have UL covering or you have ULM plus 9.5?
Ooh.
That was more my question. I think Louisiana is going to win, but I'm like, it's a big difference if it's by a field goal or if it's by 17 points or whatever.
I'll take the confident answer. I'll take the Cajuns minus 9.5. I think they win by 10.
I like that.
I think they win by 10.
I'm gonna take the over of 48.5. I think Louisiana can score some points. The over/under is pretty low. UL Monroe can usually score between 17 to 21 points. So that we'll see if that happens. But I'll take the over. Just it's a low number. I'll play it relatively safe. Now watch, this is like a 9-6 game, and we're just kicking field goals back and forth the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 2:00 ESPN Plus. Sorry, Zeke, what was your pick for the ULM
I like
game?
UL here. I like Louisiana.
Okay. All right. 2:00 ESPN Plus. Coastal is traveling to Center Park to take on Georgia State. Coastal is a 1.5-point road favorite. Over/unders 55.5. Zeke, I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to see what you think about this one before I chip in.
This is a tough one because these are two very unserious football teams.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult because part of me really thinks that Georgia State has the ability. We saw it last week against Texas State to get up and play spoiler in some sense. Coastal is playing for a bowl game here. And I think Georgia State has the ability to get up, or the capability rather, to get up for this game and play spoiler. With that said, I don't think they can do it 2 weeks in a row. I don't think they can string together what they did against Texas State into a win against Coastal. Being at home means nothing to this team. It is, this is off the cuff. This is without insight. This is the final home game. This is, you're not playing for a bowl. So this is when you put out all the seniors on kickoff and things of that nature. So give me Coastal.
I'm going to take Coastal as well. Or actually, no, I scratched that. I'm reversing course on that. I will actually take Georgia State. And the reason that I say that is because I think that this win over Texas State kind of gives them some confidence late that, they can hang with teams in the Sun Belt. It was a rough road to hold, for most of their conference stretch, actually all of their conference stretch, as this was their first win in the Sun Belt this year. Mm-hmm. But look, I think that gives them a bit of confidence, and they're at home. They're playing against a team that, I think they feel like they can hang with. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll do it. So I'll take the Panthers.
I'll just chime in real quick, because if that were the case, would that not have happened after Vanderbilt? Granted, there was a bye week in between, but after Vanderbilt, what happened? Georgia State came out and got beat by Southern at home.
Can I ask a question? I totally forgot. Did Diego Pavia play against Georgia State? He didn't, right?
No, he wasn't playing yet.
I think that's the difference. I think
he was.
I think if
he was playing.
Oh, he was
not. He was not the Diego Pavia we knew. But he did play.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he did. Okay, I stand correct.
All right. I'm gonna go Georgia State plus 1.5. If you guys watched back on the game, the Georgia Southern Coastal game from last week, Vasco can't hit water if he fell out of a boat. I mean, it's really bad. And Noah Kim got I think one snap and came in and threw an interception in that game. So as bad as Georgia State's defense is, I think maybe they're figuring some things out on offense, and you just have no idea. Again, Vasco could show up and just be 8 of 19 for 89 yards and is not even throwing it within 10 feet of any given receiver. So, you just truly have no idea what you're getting, and there's a little bit, a tiny bit of knowability with Georgia State that I just don't have with Coastal at all. I truly don't know, other than Braden Bennett, what are they bringing to the table? Truly. So that's sort of where I'm at with it. Another 2:00 kick. We've got Southern Miss traveling to Troy to take on the Trojans. Troy is a 17-point home favorite. Over/unders 48.5. Give me Troy. Troy.
Okay, cool. Glad that's over. Let's move on.
Southern Miss covered last week, and I felt stupid picking against them because South Alabama basically kind of just took their foot off the gas in the first half. But, I think Troy has really figured some things out, and I think that they're a full kind of tier above where Southern Miss is now. So I think Caldwell, I think he's got it going. So, all right, 3:00 ESPN Plus. Old Dominion's traveling to Arkansas State to Jonesboro to take on the Red Wolves. ODU, this seems wrong. Old Dominion is a 4-point road favorite. Over/unders 58.5.
that is absolutely asinine that they are a 4-point road favorite, because that means that it's truly a 7-point spread. And the fact that anybody would pick ODU to win by a touchdown is insane.
I'm gonna take ODU. It's not even I don't disagree with everything you've said, but the fact that they are a 4-point favorite and there doesn't seem to be a reason why they would be is the reason I'm gonna take them. Because there's gotta be something that I'm not aware of. Like, because it makes literally no sense. So that's I can't come up with a reason why I'm gonna take them. I guess Colton Joseph. But Arkansas State also kind of has these games sometimes where they'll put up like 18 points and you're just like, you're better than this. Like, you have parts that are greater. These should be greater than the sum of its parts. And sometimes it's just not. So I don't know. I don't even feel great about it, but I'm kind of just going against my own instinct to say like, oh, hammer Arkansas State, no questions asked. And I'm just
That's
like,
fair.
there's gotta be something here, like a reason why this is.
Mm-hmm. I think this just comes down to like, can Colton Joseph, like how good is he going to be in this game? Is he going to score 5 touchdowns, or because the yardage is going to be there? He's going to combine for 400 yards total. So it's a matter of, is he going to score the 5 touchdowns that he needs to score, or is it going to be 400 yards and 2 touchdowns? And against Arkansas, shoot. This feels like the hardest pick we're gonna make this week. I like Arkansas State. I think Colton Joseph is good enough to win this game on his own, but that doesn't mean he's gonna do it. But that's a really tough one.
Yeah. So Matt, you have Arkansas State, right?
Correct.
Okay. And I do as well.
All right. 6 p.m. ESPN Plus. App State is traveling to Georgia Southern to Paulson to take on the Eagles. The Eagles are a 2.5-point home favorite. Over under is 62.5. I really want to take App plus 2.5. Honestly, like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna hedge. I'm gonna be like, if Georgia Southern wins, great, and if they don't, then at least I didn't throw a pick in the garbage on top of it. So I'm gonna hedge and say App plus 2.5. It's not that I feel great about either of these teams because they are mid, both of them. So I would. This is like mid versus slightly more mid. So I'm gonna take App and just be like, they're playing for a bowl appearance. Georgia Southern has shown even when they need to win games and everything is on the line, they can still find a way to just come out and just turn in an absolute stinker of a performance. So I think App gets up for this one, wins straight up.
I think Georgia Southern, you guys are in both a win-win and a lose-lose at the same time. Because you lose here, App keeps Sean Clark for another year, which is a net win for everyone in the conference except for App.
Yeah.
And you guys are closer to firing Clay Helton.
We're not firing Clay Helton this year.
Right. But you're a step closer to it with if you lose. So that's the win-win there. And if you win, but then if you win, like, shoot, you're going to the conference championship, you know?
Well, Marshall has to lose too.
Mm-hmm. But then the lose side of it is, if you win, you're one step closer to keeping Clay Helton. I didn't think this fully through.
I think you mean it's a win-lose, win-lose, not a win-win, lose-lose. I think it's like you win, like, right. If you win, there's a good and a bad, and if you lose, there's a good and a bad. And like
I'm sorry.
I don't disagree with anything you said, frankly.
Right. Thank you.
Funny. It's funny that both of these teams are like, God, I hope we fire our coach, and yet it's a rivalry game where they hate each other's guts. So,
give me App State. I don't trust Georgia Southern down the stretch.
I'm going to be the oddball here. I like Georgia State at home. I mean, I like Georgia Southern at home.
Matt, you love like home field advantage.
I do. I think it. I think it matters.
You really believe in.
I think it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in a rivalry game, I think home field advantage plays a big role.
Well, the other thing too, and Matt, maybe this is something you weren't privy to, but the other thing too is there's a chance that, this being the Saturday after Thanksgiving, that a lot of our fans just stay home and don't come to this
that's
game.
that's always the case, right?
No,
that Saturday after Thanksgiving stuff.
No, but it's not just that. Like, they think about if a rabid fan base showed up to watch us play Troy at home 2 weeks ago and just watched us get road graded for 4 quarters, you've got to be like, why would I go back to school to watch that again? That's the taste that our home fans have left in their mouth.
But that's a lazy mentality.
Yeah, but if it's the difference between, like, again, you're like, if you're a casual fan, like Zeke and I have talked about this last week. If you're a casual fan and you're like, I don't know, I go to as many Georgia games as I do Southern every week. Like, you're not like a diehard, like, oh my God, I have to be at every home game. And you're kind of like, so we have to win. Clay Helton's team has to show up in a key spot. I have to come back from Thanksgiving early to go to this game. And if we win and Marshall wins, it doesn't even matter if we won or not. I think a lot of people would, after the Troy game, are like, dude, if you wanted me to come to the finale, beat Troy 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean?
I think the only excuse there that I agree with is Thanksgiving. Because look, I wouldn't come if I go out of town for Thanksgiving. I wouldn't come back early either, right? Like, I get that point. But the fact that they got skull drug at home 2 weeks ago by Troy shouldn't matter because there's still a chance that they play in the Sun Belt Championship game.
I think it doesn't matter to like the season ticket holders or the people that live in Savannah or Statesboro that live in the area or always make the trip down, but to the entire half of the stadium, because half of Paulson is student section. Yeah. To the half of that, unless you are a football fan, and I think you are going to be more tepid on that. I don't know. I
mean, again, also it's a rivalry game. Mm-hmm. We're playing App. I acknowledge that. App is a 500 football team, too. So it's not like, oh man, we could kill this like really good App team season like we have in years past when we used to play them on like Halloween and they would come in like ranked or something. Like, this is like, cool, we're going to prevent App from making a bowl game. And we have to sit and watch the scoreboard or whatever of the Marshall game. And if Marshall goes up 21-7 in the third quarter, like we're donezo anyway. Like, we're playing, Buffalo in the 68 Ventures Bowl on December 26th. Like, sweet. So like, I just feel like the casual fans are like the student casual fans might be like, I'm good on that.
I agree with you on that point, but I don't think it'll be so great that it impacts like the mojo that Matt was talking about getting from playing at home. Because I do believe it'll be less, but for the folks that do show up, it is going to mean something, and those may honestly counteract.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So last game of the night, this one's going to be a must watch. If you like Sunbelt football, you got to keep an eye on this one. ESPNU 8:00. Sunbelt with 2 ESPNU games on a Saturday is pretty good. 8:00. Marshall is traveling to Harrisonburg to take on James Madison. James Madison is a 3.5-point home favorite. Does that make any sense to anybody? Over-under is 52.5. I'm taking Marshall because, frankly, James Madison has nothing to play for at this point. They can't really do anything if they win. It doesn't improve. The only thing they can do is spoil Marshall's season. And these two teams aren't rivals. Are they rivals? No. Is there some sort of rivalry? Okay. So as far as I'm aware, they're not really rivals, even though they're in Virginia and West Virginia, respectively. And Marshall has everything to play for because they get to go to the Sun Belt title game if they win. So give me Marshall. Like, give me the team that has stuff to play for over a team that's like, hey, man, we don't really care if we're 8-4 and 9-3.
These two teams have played each other 4 times, and 2 of them have been since they've joined the Sun Belt.
Okay.
Well, yeah, no rivalry.
So they really don't care, yeah.
No. I'm going to take Marshall here as well. I think they just have a ton more to play for. And I think that's going to motivate them. And like you said, James Madison can only spoil, and I don't think they're going to care enough.
Yeah.
So I'll take the Herd.
Zeke.
Goodness. This is another tough one because like Marshall, first of all, 5 straight wins. Like you can't just look past that. But it's not the strongest 5 straight wins. So it's difficult to really have a barometer on this team where they stand. Although, you know, I may walk that back because the only loss that interrupted that streak was the Southern game, and losing that game was the best thing that ever happened to this team because it got Braylon Braxton this job. I'm overthinking this. Give me Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry.
I fully expect it to be Marshall UL in the conference championship. I think those are the 2 best teams in the conference. Like, no matter what happens on Saturday, if Southern finds a way to snake its way in, I still don't think they're really that much better of a team than Marshall. I think that comeback is, like I said, is as fluky as you could possibly get. 21 points in the last 5 minutes, including led by a backup quarterback who left the team 3 weeks later. Like, yeah, that seems like the flukiest thing you could imagine. All right, boys, as we wrap up here, Zeke, let everybody know where they can find you on socials. Matt, do the same, and then kick it back to me, and we'll sign out.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Zeke Palermo, ZekePalermo. Post about the pod, post about college sports, pro sports, local high school sports in the Rome, Georgia area. If you are from out there, Matt, where can they find you?
You can find me on social media at Miguez Matt. Hopefully the New Orleans Saints can continue winning so that my content outside of the Louisiana Raging Cajuns is enjoyable. But we'll see.
You could always cultivate. You could do what I do in Southern, like, slides, and you could just cultivate like animosity. Like that's something. Like, the one thing I can't do is just total apathy, like, toward a team. Like, I'm just like, what, you want me to tell you I don't care because we lost 5 in a row in the season last year? Like, so I'd rather it be some sort of feeling than being like, oh boy, can't wait to get out of here. All right, you can find me on X at Watch the Stone. Like I said, we will be back next Sunday night broadcasting here to talk about the results of this week. We could look ahead a little bit to the conference championship game, although we will do a full episode breaking that down and maybe even some early bowl stuff depending on what gets announced and when. We also will have bonus content on our YouTube page. The week of the conference championship, I am putting up the Sun Belt Family Feud that we did a couple weeks ago. I had been holding off on that to when we had like a shorter episode and kind of less going on. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/@warmweatherfans. We will be back next Sunday. Like I said, peace, everybody.